Because a waiter at a tea house was diagnosed with AIDS, the news instantly caused an uproar in the whole town. All the men went for a physical examination without any prior arrangement, and even the army was shrouded in fear, because basically everyone in this town had had contact with this waiter in secret. But just when all the men were terrified, there was a man who seemed out of place. He was the husband of the waiter, Seok-joong, the most honest man in the whole town. Before he met the waiter, his life was only about cows and cow dung. Because of this, he was still single in his 40s despite being sloppy. Seeing his friends around him get married and start a family, he found it increasingly difficult to suppress his yearning. In order to experience the taste of having a woman, he spent all his savings and planned to marry a Filipino wife from an agent. However, what he never expected was that the other party took the money but did not fulfill his promise. Seok-joong went to ask for money angrily, but was beaten up by the other party. Despite this, he still pestered to get the money back. Seok-joong promised the cow that he would never think about women again. No matter how lonely he would not marry a strange woman. However, the next second, he showed his unfaithfulness to the fullest. He was firmly grasped by the girl's appearance at a glance on the roadside. At that moment, he threw all the work in his hands behind his mind. Seok-joong couldn't help but smell the fragrance of the girl and followed her on his bike. It was not until the smell of disinfectant hit him that Seok-joong realized that he had followed her to the hospital. Later, after asking his friends, Seok-joong learned that the woman he liked was named Eun-ha, and she was engaged in a special profession as a tea house waitress. In addition to working as a waitress every day, she occasionally delivered takeout and did some shameful transactions. Because of the nature of her job, Eun-ha would go for regular checkups every month. However, even though he already knew the other person's job, Seok-joong, who was just beginning to fall in love, was still obsessed with him. In order to see Eun-ha again, the stingy Seok-joong even spent a lot of money to invite his friends to sing. That night, all the good friends had a great time. Only Seok-joong sat in the corner with a stiff face. It was the first time for Eun-ha to see such an honest man. She took the initiative to approach him and hugged him openly. Accompanied by the close contact of the opposite sex's skin, this unprecedented experience at this moment completely made Seok-joong lose himself. When Seok-joong came out, looking at his unsatisfied expression, his friends encouraged Seok-joong to ask Eun-ha out. As long as you pay, she can do anything for you. Hearing his friend's contemptuous tone towards Eun-ha, Seok-joong almost got into a fight with his friends. However, the next day, Seok-joong ordered takeout against his will and asked Eun-ha to deliver it. When he opened the door and saw that the customer was Seok-joong, Eun-ha instantly felt contempt in her heart. This seemingly honest man was just like this. Eun-ha didn't waste any words and went straight to the point. And Seok-joong, who was doing it for the first time, was nervous and lay aside and didn't dare to move. In the end, under Eun-ha's initiative, Seok-joong half pushed and half pushed to spend the most beautiful first night of his life. Since this time, Seok-joong can no longer extricate himself. From then on, Seok-joong would always find various reasons to go to the restaurant to find Eun-ha. And Eun-ha also found this shy man very funny. The two gradually became familiar with each other, and he would secretly bring milk and roses to Eun-ha every day. Hiding in the dark and seeing Eun-ha accept his gift, Seok-joong was as happy as a child. However, he had no idea that Eun-ha poured out the milk directly after receiving the gift because she didn't like drinking milk since she was a child. Her best friend stopped Eun-ha from doing this, asking why not take a bath with milk. Eun-ha also thought it was a good idea. In the days that followed, Seok-joong went to the restaurant more and more frequently. He always tried hard to show himself in front of Eun-ha and even regarded the handkerchief that Eun-ha used to wipe his sweat as a treasure. As the relationship between the two people became closer day by day, this illusion made Seok-joong think that Eun-ha must like him too. So in order to take the relationship further, he invited Eun-ha to watch a drive-in movie and planned to take the opportunity to confess to her. As a result, before Seok-joong finished speaking, Eun-ha interrupted him and explained that watching a movie together did not mean dating. Eun-ha turned away without looking back, leaving Seok-joong with a confused look. Seok-joong thought that Eun-ha despised him for being poor, so he took all his savings and found Eun-ha again the next day. Seok-joong happened to meet Eun-ha, who was about to go out to deliver food, and handed her the money and asked her not to deliver food in the future. Eun-ha asked Seok-joong not to interfere in her life, and Eun-ha was angry and threw the money at Seok-joong and slapped him. The two parted unhappily, and Eun-ha also felt that her behavior was excessive. Facing other customers, she no longer had the heart to work. Eun-ha drank herself drunk every day, and Seok-joong waited for her every day as usual. Faced with the meticulous care of this infatuated man, Eun-ha gradually changed her opinion of this man in her heart. As Seok-joong cares for her day by day, Eun-ha's resistance becomes less and less. She stopped working as a delivery girl and even gradually accepted milk, which she had hated since she was a child. At the same time, Seok-joong's mother also heard the gossip that her son was pursuing a waitress at a tea house. For her son's happiness and face, she dragged her son to force him to go on a blind date and even deliberately set the blind date address to where Eun-ha worked. Watching the scene of Seok-joong's blind date, Eun-ha was furious. As if she was angry with him, Eun-ha took the delivery order again with tears in her eyes. But because of her mood, Eun-ha had an argument with a customer. The enraged man hit her head hard with a bottle of wine. Eun-ha fainted on the ground with a bloody head in an instant. Seok-joong rushed to the hospital immediately after learning that Eun-ha was injured. Under Seok-joong's care, Eun-ha was fine. Looking at the man who truly loves her, Eun-ha's frozen heart was finally completely melted by this man at this moment. Seok-joong once again summoned up the courage to confess to the other party. This time, Eun-ha chose to accept. At this moment, Eun-ha felt that this man might be the man she could entrust her life to. In this way, the two soon entered the palace of marriage, and everyone was surprised by Seok-joong's choice. Despite this, their married life was extremely sweet. They both loved each other deeply in their hearts, and even their mother gradually accepted Eun-ha. Her virtue not only made her mother-in-law praise her as gold in the mud, but even Eun-ha took out her own private money to invite her mother-in-law to travel to Jeju Island. At this moment, the whole family was developing in a happy atmosphere and moving in a good direction. However, their seemingly sweet life did not last too long. On this day, the arrival of a man completely broke this beautiful tranquility. The other party asked Eun-ha to go to the hotel and force her to have sex. Seok-joong waited anxiously at home all night, but still did not see his wife come back until dawn. Just when Seok-joong wanted to call the police, the man took the initiative to call. The other party asked Seok-joong to meet, saying that he was Eun-ha's husband, and also took out their wedding photos. It was not until then that Seok-joong realized that he had been deceived. It turned out that Eun-ha's real name was Jeon Yoo-fin, and she had been married for a long time. Because she couldn't stand the domestic violence of her ex-husband, she escaped and hid in another place. The ex-husband threatened Seok-joong that if he didn't pay 1 million won to compensate him, he would take Eun-ha back. But at this time, in Seok-joong's heart, Eun-ha was his beloved who could never give up. No matter what kind of person Eun-ha was before, he couldn't lose her again. After saying goodbye to the cow, Seok-joong finally sold his cow with great pain. She borrowed high-interest loans to collect enough money and gave it to her ex-husband, and the two signed an agreement privately that they would not harass Eun-ha again. I thought that things would pass like this, but the scumbag ex-husband still refused to let Eun-ha go. He would still find various reasons to ask her for money and threatened her from time to time. However, misfortunes followed one after another. On this day, the hospital staff found Seok-joong. The other party also told his wife that she had contracted AIDS and suggested that he also go to the hospital for a checkup. In an instant, Seok-joong felt that the sky had fallen and he didn't know how to live next. A few days later, the hospital's test results came out. Fortunately, Seok-joong was not infected, but at this moment he couldn't be happy at all. The doctor asked Seok-joong why he came alone and whether he hadn't told Eun-ha about the matter yet. Seok-joong just asked if Eun-ha would die, and the doctor didn't answer. Meanwhile, Eun-ha was still waiting for her husband to return home, and the recent situation at home made her feel very guilty. Because of her affair with her ex-husband, Seok-joong sold his cow and was heavily in debt. Eun-ha was very upset that she had implicated her husband. It rained heavily at night, but Seok-joong did not have the courage to step into the house. He did not know how to tell his wife the news, but he was more worried that his wife would leave him because of this disease. However, when he returned home after much hesitation, there was only a full table of food and a letter left by his wife. In the letter, his wife said that because of her affair with her ex-husband, her husband had to sell his cow and suffered. And Eun-ha did not want to deliberately deceive Seok-joong. She really loved Seok-joong, absolutely sincerely. Eun-ha also promised to repay her husband for everything. Seok-joong rushed out of the room like crazy, and he braved the heavy rain to look for his wife everywhere. But that night, there was no news from her. In the days that followed, Seok-joong's only thought was to find his wife. He traveled to every corner of Korea, but still had no news of his wife. Until one day, he accidentally found the extra money in his passbook. After checking the bank's remittance records, he realized that it was all sent by Eun-ha, just when Seok-joong thought he would never find Eun-ha again in this life. That day, he suddenly received a call from the police station. I thought this would be the beginning of my return to love, but I didn't expect it to be the beginning of a nightmare. It turned out that Eun-ha couldn't bear Seok-joong to bear so much debt, so she chose to go back to her old job. But unfortunately, she didn't know she was infected with AIDS. For more than a year, she caused nearly 2,000 people to be infected. Now Eun-ha can only be locked up in the detention center, waiting for the condemnation of the society and the judgment of the law. Seok-joong cried heartbrokenly but could do nothing when he did not expect such a result when they met again. At the same time, men in the streets and alleys lined up to have blood tests. Whether men or women, even the army was frightened. Just at this time, an unscrupulous reporter found Seok-joong. He lied that as long as he accepted his private interview, there would be a chance for Eun-ha to be acquitted. Seok-joong, who was eager to see Eun-ha, believed the reporter's words without hesitation. He told the reporter all the stories about himself and Eun-ha. However, he made the headlines the next day. In order to gain traffic, the unscrupulous reporter took their stories out of context and published them. In an instant, the two of them became sinners in everyone's mouth, and their families were also pushed to the forefront because of them. Everyone avoided their family, fearing that they would be infected with AIDS. But even so, Seok-joong still didn't think of giving up his wife. He wanted to visit Eun-ha again and again, but was rejected by Eun-ha. Eun-ha didn't want to implicate Seok-joong anymore. Now she felt that she had no face to face that man. Although she loved him very much, she had to give up in order not to hurt him. On the other hand, Seok-joong was already sick with longing. He could only look at the memory of himself and his wife every day and put on a smile. Seeing his devastated appearance, his mother was so angry that she scolded him on the spot and destroyed the videotape that recorded their beautiful moments. Afterwards, his mother took out a bowl of lye and wanted to commit suicide. At this time, Seok-joong suddenly snatched the lye from his mother's hand and drank it. Seok-joong was sent to the hospital overnight. Fortunately, his family sent him to the hospital for rescue in time, so he was lucky to be rescued. However, his vocal cords were permanently damaged due to the injury, and he could no longer speak normally as before. While Seok-joong was suffering in the hospital, Eun-ha was also facing her own trial. The judge sentenced Eun-ha to 2 years in prison, including the detention period before the trial. Before being imprisoned, Eun-ha finally chose to meet Seok-joong. She wanted to put a perfect end to their imperfect relationship. She didn't want to leave any worries for this man who loved her deeply. After receiving the news, Seok-joong held back his tears and came to the prison accompanied by his mother. The moment the two met, thousands of words could not express the torment in each other's hearts. In order to dispel Seok-joong's obsession with herself, Eun-ha deliberately said the most cruel words to him. Seok-joong, who lost his vocal cords, was heartbroken. Even if he had thousands of words, he couldn't make any sound. Seok-joong took out the oath he had prepared and showed it to her. Every word was endless love for Eun-ha. Eun-ha pretended to be indifferent and kept saying all kinds of cruel words. Although she was heartbroken and couldn't breathe, Eun-ha still suppressed her emotions and rejected him ruthlessly. She didn't want to bring any misfortune to the man who loved her. Seeing Eun-ha about to leave under the escort of the prison guards, Seok-joong couldn't suppress his emotions at this moment. He kept hitting the glass and shouting Eun-ha's name with his hoarse throat. When Eun-ha was about to leave, she realized that Seok-joong's voice was so hoarse when he shouted her name. Eun-ha kept asking him excitedly why his voice was like this. Seok-joong only said, "Eun-ha, I miss you very much. I'm fine." Looking at her beloved husband, Eun-ha could no longer control her tears. It was not until this time that Eun-ha knew that Seok-joong could no longer speak. This young and handsome man had been tortured to death because of her arrival. Eun-ha hated herself, hated why she hurt the man who loved her with his life. As the visiting time ended, Eun-ha was forcibly taken out by the prison guard again. At this time, Seok-joong could no longer control himself. He climbed up the window and roughly removed the prison speaker. Through the small window, he held his wife and refused to let go. Time flew, and 2 years passed in a blink of an eye. In a snowy winter, Eun-ha finally stepped out of the prison where she lost her freedom. She greedily bathed in the snow all over the sky and earth, and at this time, a happy smile rose at the corner of her mouth. She knew that the person she loved deeply appeared. Some people say that love is poison for young people, but perhaps the truth is not so. True love may be willing to drink the bitter wine of fate with the one you love. In the darkest moment, still encourage each other to believe in the arrival of the glimmer of light. Perhaps it is to support each other and grow together in the quagmire of reality, and work together to break the suffering and catastrophe that fate has brought. The road of this life is long, but it is important who you are with. People will meet many people in their life, but there will always be someone who will be your destined one. Love is never a romantic fairy tale of wind, flowers, snow, and moon, but the warmth woven with love after crossing the thorns of fate. Perhaps the world cannot understand this madness, but for true love, love is never a superficial icing on a cake, but a fateful entanglement that transcends life and death.